Okay, microphones and cameras are live.
Good morning, all. I will now call the June 6, 2023 Committee of the Whole meeting to order. The time is 11 o'clock. Mr. Hlaback-Windsor, can you please provide us with an overview of the meeting procedures?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded and will be available to the public for playback on our website in accordance with Council Policy 3.12. Committee of the Whole is the initial venue for council review of information to ensure that council can debate and vote on issues at a future council meeting. No voting takes place on bylaws or resolutions during Committee of the Whole. This meeting is being conducted through the city's One Meeting platform. However, council will be using voting cards to indicate their vote on each motion today. Green for in favor, red for opposed, yellow for a point of order. I will manually take note of the votes and log them into the system. To be put on the speakers list, please physically raise your hand so that the chair can add you to the list. For members of the public online who would like to speak during community forum, please register as a speaker by clicking the microphone icon in the One Meeting portal and turn on your camera. If you are attending the meeting in person, please come forward to the podium when Madam Chair invites you to speak. And before speaking online or in person, clearly state your name and city of residence before beginning your comments.
Thank you. I would like to acknowledge that the City of Maple Ridge carries out its business on the traditional unceded territory of the Katzie First Nation and the Kwantlen First Nation. May I have a motion to approve the agenda, please? Moved by Councillor Carreras, seconded by Councillor Doze. All those in favor? That has passed. Next item, please.
The next item on the agenda is the adoption of the minutes.
Thank you. So we're looking at the Committee of the Whole minutes of May 16th, 2023. Are there any amendments to the minutes? Councillor Carreras.
Just a point of order, can we get an extra set of voting cards?
Yes.
We have one member of
Certainly.
council here who doesn't have voting.
Mines are on your desk.
It's important that we all have our voting cards. Thank you.
Yay. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any amendments to the minutes? Do you have some amendments?
No, I thought we were just voting.
We will go ahead then and vote on the adoption of the minutes. All those in favor?
I believe we moved and seconded at the beginning, but for the record, can we, who was the mover of this?
Let's do it again. Okay.
do it again.
Can we get a mover, please? Councillor Youssef, seconded by Councillor Carreras. All those in favor? That has passed. Thank you.
Okay.
Next item, please.
The next item on this morning's agenda is item 4.1, which is a delegation from the Canadian Mental Health Association of Vancouver Fraser. And Ruby Ng is here to present, and I have the presentation up on the screen whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for giving some of your time and attention to a matter that is important to all of us as individuals and also as communities. I'll go through a quick presentation. This really is a reintroduction of Canadian Mental Health Association, Vancouver Fraser branch. And I'd like to share with you some of our priorities and maybe open up a conversation and dialogue subsequently about how we can work together to support better mental health in our communities. Is there a clicker? This one? Okay. So just so everyone knows, Canadian Mental Health Association is a federated model. So that means in BC alone, there are 14 separate branches, all separate legal entities, all under the same banner. We share a national vision, but each of us have our own specific strategic priorities based on local needs. Our branch provides 13 direct in-community programs out of 24 delivery sites. Our region is from UBC all the way out to Chilliwack, with discussions about the need for community delivery in Richmond. Our programs range from prevention to recovery. So it's for example, children and youth Bounce Back, which is coaching for depression, anxiety, things like that, respite programs. We have a Here for Peer programs where high school with lived experience develop skills and they go and speak with grade 6 students and start building more media literacy, or mental health literacy, all the way to recovery. And that includes employment as well as housing. In Maple Ridge, we have one transitional house with 5 rooms. The house that we're currently operating from is over 100 years old. And we have been hearing from members of the community that they would like to see more housing options. And we continue to have conversations with the health authority in order to see what we could do more of. We did a community survey when I first joined. So I'm approaching my 2nd anniversary as CEO for CMHA Vancouver Fraser. First year is discovery. And when I joined, I said to everybody, I'm gonna wave my newbie card for 2 years. And so the 2nd year has really been about rebuilding. And so when I first started, I polled my professional network, CMHA's network of followers and supporters, to find out, what do you know about CMHA and what do you need us to do? And really what this pie chart says is everything is needed. Whether it's access or counseling or workplace support, everything. And we have a limit as a charity of being everything to everybody. So the board and leadership team focused on revisioning and thinking about what it is that we need to do over the next 3 years. And we just launched our 3-year strategic plan. We really are here about transforming mental health. The health system is what it is. Everybody's doing their best. There are a lot of different programs throughout the region. How do we work better together and improve and learn from the work that's being done? That's the gist of what we're here to do. Our focus is on people first. As you can imagine, our frontline staff did not stop during the pandemic. There's been a lot of burnout. There's a lot of need to care for our frontline staff. And so we really have made that not only about wellness, but also a culture of wellness, a significant part of who CMHA Vancouver Fraser is meant to be. And we have 3 strategic priorities that we're focusing on. The number 1 is network collaboration. And what that means for us is really, how do we work with other community agencies and partners in government, in corporate, in labor, in order to expand and build on the programs that we know are successful and expand and reach and help more people. One of the key things we're doing this year, and we're doing this with Chilliwack as well as with New Westminster, we're doing roundtables, and we're planning on doing system mapping. So what are the pathways to our programs in specific communities? What are the pathways with partners, and what are the shareable services in order to build business cases to take to Fraser Health? And this is our approach to trying to find solutions for improvement. We have CMHA has implemented peer-assisted care teams. Some of you may have heard about. It's an alternative response to police presence in crisis situations that involve mental illness. We're also in discussions with TransLink about doing a public awareness campaign that really is meant to address the stigma of mental illness in direct correlation with violence. So there are a lot of different programs that we're working on. We're also planning next year to launch a BC Leadership Conference. Last year, I had the privilege of being invited to the Governor General's Canadian Leadership Conference. 250 Canadians who've come together and spend 2 weeks together on a study tour. Myself and another alumni are looking to build the same model, but specifically in British Columbia. So that's some of the network collaboration initiatives. And then innovative programming. One of the programs we're piloting starting this year is to look at the combination of mental health literacy and education with actual leadership development that's focused on personal mastery. And this is partly to invest in the current workforce, knowing that economic recovery is a huge priority for everybody. how do we invest in and support the individuals who are moving up and filling those senior positions? And we really do believe that mental health in the workplace is something that needs to be taken into consideration. And then lastly, revenue and capacity growth. We have a mental health education program, which is cost recovery. But we really, as a nonprofit, see it as our responsibility to come to the table with resources as well, and to really be in partnership with organizations and agencies. So those are our three main priorities. And my question to the council would be, as it relates to Maple Ridge, how can we help? Where is the need? What should we be paying attention to as we advance our strategic plan? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Council, are there any questions or comments? Councillor Youssef.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the presentation. Just a couple quick questions, if I may. What services and what age groups do you work with here in Maple Ridge? And then my second question is, do you only cover Maple Ridge, or is it Maple Ridge and Pitt Meadows?
Right now for a housing program, I'd say that our general demographic would be adults. We do have, which is run from New Westminster, a youth independent living program, but that's mostly based in New West. We absolutely can deliver. We have an employment program that includes Maple Ridge and Pitt Meadows. It's just, I don't think we have a staff member who's embedded in the health unit in that area. So we have traveling, supporting neighbors.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Those were my questions.
Great. Councillor Tan, thank you.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thank you very much for your presentation. It was interesting. And thank you as well for taking time to come and ask a very open-ended question on what we need. We need support in many, many areas. So I'd love to hear, I'd love to hear just coming back from you and your staff, like what you're best positioned to provide and how, and just hearing about the network collaboration part, we are lucky to have many community groups and also some service providers operating in our community. It is no secret that our community, like many other communities, we are working through some challenges with mental health in our population, both from anywhere from youth to seniors. So I think it's for me, it's a very broad question for us to tackle, but sort of everything and anything we'd love your support. And I wonder what is the best way to proceed with that?
I thank you for that question. I am encouraged that Chilliwack and New Westminster is wanting to partner with us to convene these roundtables, because we want to look for integration opportunities with what already exists. So if we use CMHA specifically with our house, operationally, one of the priorities is that house is 100 years old. It houses 5 people. Is there a way for us to take the land or the property which we own and convert it into something that can, have more than 5 units, a duplex or anything like that? That's a major campaign for an organization like us. So starting there and then mapping out who are the other agencies, because CMHA's programs are based in psychosocial rehabilitation, which is the idea that an individual has to have a sense of agency and focus on their strengths with setting their goals. They have to have supporting programs to go to as part of that journey. So how do we make sure that we're working together with other agencies? Undoubtedly, there are going to be gaps. We all have heard conversations about the health system, but I would like to take what exists, get some data, have the conversations, and then make the business case. Because I don't think it's only the municipal governments. I don't think it's only nonprofit. I think it's going to take a collaborative effort, but the data is really important.
Thank you. I'm encouraged to hear that. And in terms of, there are many subject matter experts in this room who are better equipped to tell you sort of the next steps or share with you the next steps than I am. But I think sort of on our council, we just hosted a summit on housing last week, as you might have heard. You know, our mayor is a strong leader in the need for rentals and affordable housing and housing of all shapes and forms. So I think, you know, on that vision, I think that is one of our strategic priorities. And I think that many of us would be excited to support.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much for your presentation. And
you.
oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, Mayor Rumi, please go ahead.
I know I'm short.
I
back here.
just look up a little bit.
I'm normally short, but today I'm shorter. Thank you very much for your presentation. We know across this country, mental health is another one of those crises that are affecting almost every Canadian in one form or another. I just would like to elaborate. You mentioned that you have a home here that's over 100 years old.
The actual house.
Yeah, could you elaborate? Like, what's happening in the home? What's going on there? Well, what more information can you give us?
Yeah, so it's a detached house in it's over 100 years old. I'd say what happens in there is each resident who has a caseworker has come through the mental health unit and the health system, come to our house in order to start developing life skills. So the residents are responsible for the cleanliness, the maintenance, getting out there into the community and things like that. That's the plan. So I'll share as a very recent experience that, and we have a residential support worker who works 6 hours at the house, but they go home. The residents are expected to tend to themselves as part of their sense of agency. In the evenings, we found that an individual with a particular mental illness challenge was starting to present behavior in certain ways to a point where police had to be called. This was frightening for all the residents. This was frightening for our residential support worker who was there. The police did have to be called. The individual presented very well, so that it didn't seem like a threatening situation. Ultimately, we were able to get the individual to get some medical attention at hospital. In less than a week, they were discharged and put back into the home. But that's in some ways all we can do, support them wherever they are. But even getting information between different systems, how do we best support? Are we sharing information? Those are, I apologize, but operational bureaucratic systems sometimes that doesn't necessarily put the individual at the forefront of what they need. And as a result, there might be some safety risks. So what we're doing as an organization, and I had just met with a residential support worker and also our housing manager, is what are some adjustments we can make to motivate behavior and to stay on top of taking medications. In some cases, we discovered that this individual had bags of pharmaceutical meds that weren't being taken. So we need to take steps to make sure that we're witnessing. So all of those are the daily things I think that happen in a residence. And on top of that, we need to make sure that they are getting some support in the community as well.
I guess one of the things I'm looking for is perhaps how many people are there at a time? What's the long-term part? So if somebody goes into here, are they expected to stay there for a year or
2 years?
2 years. Oh.
And that's not the case. We have one house in another community where some of the residents, because there's nowhere for them to go,
right,
really, that they have really become a senior in that home. And the seniors part of the health system isn't ready to take them either. So we can't put them on the street. So we keep them, but it's
no, that's
another,
okay.
yeah.
And my final follow-up question is, how do they get referred to this place? Do they go through
The health unit, the mental health unit.
the mental health unit, the provincial mental health?
Yeah.
Unit? So what role does your organization play in that?
So we're contracted services,
Okay.
essentially. Do we think we could do more? Yeah, we'd love to have that conversation. And that's part of the network collaboration and innovative programming. We've got years and years of data. How can we be at the table for some innovative programming? And so that is the point of building the business case right now and getting the data.
Thank you. That's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Rumi. Thank you very much for your presentation. It's great to learn about the work of your organization and the work you're doing here in the community. And clearly, it would seem we will be continuing on the conversation. Thank you for coming today.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item on this morning's agenda is item 5.1, which is application 2023-064 AL for 27098 180th Avenue. And I believe Mr. McMullen is going to be doing this presentation.
Thank you. Please go ahead.
Good morning, Madam Chair and Committee. This application at 27098 108th Avenue is for a non-hearing use application for second temporary dwelling. The existing OCP designation is agriculture, and the site is zoned RS3 single detached rural residential. The site is approximately 2 acres, and the purpose, as noted, is to allow the construction of a new residence while maintaining the existing residence for a period of construction. This is the subject map showing the location 108th Avenue. Ortho photo showing the existing environment around the area. As noted, this application for non-hearing use is to allow the construction of a new residence while maintaining the existing residence during construction. The existing house will be demolished as a condition of issuance of the occupancy permit for the proposed new dwelling unit. The proposed new dwelling is actually a passive house design, which includes high-performance building standards to minimize the building's ecological footprint with solar panels, rain water collection, and gray water recycling. Since Bill 52 was adopted in 2019, applications such as this are required for a property owner to keep an existing dwelling during construction of a new residence. Previously, it was not required. There was just a bond and agreement with the city. The city will still be requiring the $10,000 demolition security or bond until the house is removed as a condition of building permit. So the site here showing the existing residence to be demolished at the front that will be maintained just during construction of the new building in the center of the lot. So the report recommendation is before you. I should just note that if council were not to approve this recommendation, it would not be forwarded to the ALC and the applicant would have to demolish the house now before getting a building permit for the main house. Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from council? Councillor Youssef?
Like to move it, Madam Chair, before we discuss it?
Thank you. Do we have a second? Councillor Dewar, thank you. Are there any questions? Mayor Rumi?
Yes, thank you very much for the presentation. So the basically the rule has changed and we need to get, or the owner needs to get the ALC's permission to keep the house there while they build the new place.
Correct.
So I guess the question is, have we encountered this before? Or is this something that the ALC should approve? Can we expect that?
Madam Chair, through to Mayor Rumi, we have a few of these applications and they have been approved. We do have the bond as well as the power of the Agricultural Land Commission to ensure this is carried out.
Okay. And then the final question I have is the new building that's going up, has that gone through a process yet or no?
The new house is just going through the building permit process,
It's
but
just going
the building permit cannot be issued until either the ALC allows for the existing dwelling to be maintained or it's removed.
And are there, I guess it's kind of, when you look at the process, are there any preconditions that they're going to meet for the new house because it's on ALC land?
Yes, so the house is conforming to the zoning, the agricultural zoning, RS3 zoning that has agricultural provisions. It conforms to the Agricultural Land Commission Act, and that the new house is under 500 square meters, is about 309 square meters. So it conforms to the size, and the location is in conformance with our farm home plate being within 60 meters of the front parcel line.
So will that be coming to council, the new house?
No,
No,
no.
because it's already-
It conforms to our zoning and the ALC regulations.
Okay, that's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? You mentioned that the new house that's planned is being built to a passive design. And I just wondered if there was any more information sort of on why that had been selected. And it's just something I'm interested in hearing a little bit more about the features that are being included.
I believe the applicant is available to speak about this, Mr. Moreno. I think he is in the audience here. He could speak a little bit more about this. House builder and applicant.
Thank you. Thank you for
Good
being
morning.
here. Good morning.
Thank you. Thank you for your question. So my wife and I have two children who are 9 and 12, and we moved to Maple Ridge to have them join the environmental school, the public school program that is facilitated here. And at that time, we had always wanted to build the cleanest, greenest house that we could. We lived in the Albion area for about 5 years, almost 7 years, I guess. And a parcel came available on 108th, and we went and looked at it on a spur of a moment and realized it had an orchard. It had the ability to grow vegetables. And so we decided that it was an important step for us to give our children an opportunity to understand how to live on and with the land and to produce from that land. So we bought the property with the intention of making the farm usable again. And we realized to do that, we'd need to build a new home. And so being blessed as we are with the opportunities that have been accorded us as business professionals, we decided to take our savings and the money we were able to gather together and build a house that was very different than traditional buildings. So the home, if you're not familiar with passive house, the idea is that it is located based on maximizing solar gain, reducing the energy required to heat and cool the house. The walls are approximately 15 inches thick, 2 2x4 walls with 9 inches of cellulose in between. We're selecting not only materials that are available locally, but on top of that, my wife has a master's degree in environmental sciences. And so she's been the project lead on identifying the cleanest products available. So you can buy a metal roof, but it's generally coated with PFAS products that are long-term chemicals that remain in the environment. We're choosing a manufacturer that doesn't use those type of chemicals. So that's the plan behind the passive house. We have a solar permit that's before the building department right now to add solar onto one of the existing farm buildings. That will provide at least 98% of the power that's required by the new home. So we'll basically be a net zero consumer. And we're at this point about 67% less carbon in the manufacture of the home than a traditional house. Our builder from B Collective thinks they're actually going to be able to put the prefab section of the home up in about 2 days. So the framing will be unbelievably fast. So that was our choice, and we're hoping to encourage people to come out and see the project as it gets built. We're certainly encouraging members of the building department to challenge us on the reasons we're doing certain things and come out and see it as it gets built, and maybe more people will adopt a similar idea, similar plan.
Thank you very much. That sounds like a really neat project, and that's so great. You guys are willing to share the experience with the community. It sounds like there's a lot to learn there. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Seeing no more questions, all those in favor of moving this to next week's council meeting, and that is unanimous. Thank you. Mr. Hlavik-Windsor, what is the next item on the agenda?
Okay, the next item 5.2 is application 2023-059 RZ, and this is pertaining to 28304 96th Avenue, and it's a rezoning from RS3 and P4 to RS3. And Mr. McMullen has a presentation on this one as well.
Thank you. Please go ahead whenever you're ready.
So the application on the agenda as introduced by Mr. Patrick Hlavik-Windsor is for consideration of first and second reading for zone amending bylaw 7925/2023. The site is designated rural residential, and the existing zoning is a bit interesting. It's a split zoned property. We don't have too many of these. It's zoned RS3, single detached rural residential on the east half, and P4 place of worship on the west half of the parcel. The proposed zoning is to make the whole site RS3, single detached rural residential. The site area is approximately 0.8 hectares, and it's to allow the existing place of worship building to be used as a single family dwelling. This is subject property on the on the map and the OCP context showing the whole area is rural residential designation in the OCP, and the orthophoto showing the existing built environment, the building in the upper left corner or northwest corner of the property and much of it treed. And as noted, this is to rezone the west portion of the property to RS3 to allow for the change of use of the existing building from place of worship, single detached dwelling. The current designation is rural residential for the whole property and supports a proposed zoning, and the site is split zoned as previously noted. The building operated as a church for quite some time, but has not been used for a place of worship for several years. And the lot is rectangular and bounded by single family rural residential properties all around as shown on the previous orthophoto map. And no further development of the site is requested through this application. It's using the existing building as a detached single family dwelling, thus needing the rezoning of that portion of the property. If the application were to proceed to completion, this existing building with the new zoning would have a slight relaxation needed for the west property line from 1.5 to 1.38 meters. And that would be the subject of a future report to council. Madam Chair and Committee.
Thank you very much. Can I get a mover and a seconder, please? Moved by Mayor Rumi, seconded by Councillor Carreras. Are there any questions? Okay, seeing none, I will call the vote. All those in favor of sending this ahead to next council meeting, and that is unanimous. Thank you. What do we have next, Mr. Hlavik-Windsor?
The next item is item 5.3, and it's application 2019-293 RZ, and it pertains to 20786 River Road, and it is a rezoning from RS1 to RT2, and Mr. Goddard is going to be doing this presentation.
Thank you. Just before we get started, this is the one that has been referred back to staff previously back in 2021.
That is correct, Madam Chair.
Okay, and so just for myself, this is sort of typically we're looking at things for the first time. So can you just sort of clarify for me what the decision is before council at this meeting?
So, Madam Chair, and the rest of council, the decision here, there is no decision with respect to this application. It is simply to obtain enough information to be able to vote on it at the next council meeting for the readings that are being put forward. So it's simply today, we are making sure that this item either goes forward to a council meeting or it goes back to staff.
Thank you. And would that go forward to council as a first reading? I just want to make sure I understand where we are in the process.
No, it would be a second reading because there were substantive changes. I'm sorry, it would be an amendment to the second reading because there were changes to it.
Let me clarify. Actually, we're recommending it proceed back to a second public hearing because the original bylaws were reduced in density. That does not require the rescinding of first and second reading. So those are still standing. It was failed on the third reading to move forward after the public hearing. So we're bringing it back in the amended form of the design, and the density has been reduced to a new public hearing. So we're only asking council to grant another public hearing, and then you will have the opportunity to grant third or not. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, maybe you can just speak to that. Sorry, we'll come right back to you, Councillor Carreras. So, I'm just sort of thinking of typically the type of questions that we ask, in terms of do we have enough information to make a decision on council? And because public hearing is not a situation where we're making a decision, can you just clarify a little bit? Are we sort of evaluating the changes that have been made?
You are. At today's meeting, you'll ask questions about the project and the nature of it and maybe the history, and then it'll go to a public hearing we're proposing, but it'll first go to council. You'll go to council to then decide to move it forward to public hearing or not. but the readings have occurred, first and second have occurred, and they're existing still. The application is still the original application, but after public hearing, we will then come, you will have an opportunity to then make a decision whether or not to grant a third reading.
So will it go forward to a council meeting? We would
You
then
will
send
see
it
it
to a
next
public
week,
hearing?
correct? You will, and then
Yes.
you will decide then whether to move it forward or not.
Thank you. Councillor Carreras did, thank you
Correct,
for a decision at a council meeting. Yes.
correct.
Thank you for that. Let's have the presentation, please, whenever you're
Sure.
ready.
Thank you. It is a rezoning application, as we all know. There is an associated development permit, of course, and some variances being required. It is for a 6-unit detached form of housing under what we consider the courtyard proposal, which is allowed on major corridors such as River Road. This density is supportable. The staff support the application. We're recommending it move forward and to a public hearing in the future, subject to council's review next week under zoning bylaw 7614/2020. So the bylaws that were in place earlier are existing today and are moving forward. So it is urban residential, and it's not in the area Hammond plan. It's outside just, with that boundary is just on the west side of the property. So it's urban designation on a major collector road, which does allow greater densities. Those densities can be in the form of single family, townhouses, duplexes, fourplexes, townhouses, courtyards, and apartments, in fact. The site is 1/2 acre in size, which is a very large site for our urban environment. The current zoning is single family RS1. The proposal is the ground floor residential infill, which is the RT2 zone. This is essentially considered an infill sort of situation. The construction is proposed for 6 units. These are not attached. The previous application had them in duplex forms. They're now detached to be more consistent with the neighborhood. This is the subject site. The school is just to the west and south. River Road is the access point. There's the urban designation. The school, of course, is institutional. On the other side is single family in the area of the Hammond area plan. There's the site. I believe there are no structures now on the property. Few trees. Again, the proposal was originally for 8 units. It's now 6, been reduced. It's still zoned to RT2 is the proposal. It did go to public hearing on July 20th, 2021. Given the time lapse, it's appropriate, we think, to do another public hearing to give the neighborhood an opportunity to speak to the issues as well as the new form. A development information was held by the applicant as this process to inform them of the new revised plan. Again, it was originally 8, now it's 6. They're detached form, more in keeping with the neighborhood. The homes are 2.5 stories and 3. There are in-ground basements. The density form of the bigger units are facing the school site and away from the single family to the west. Required parking has been achieved. They meet the parking bylaw as well as 2 additional parking spaces for visitors. There may also be a space or 2 on River Road for parking once the revision to the and the route widening occurs there. Again, it's a fairly significant take on River Road of 5 meters or more. And the CAC program does apply to the units, which would total $34,200 in this case, if council proceeds to third reading and final. Again, that there are 3 stories on the west side. It would interface with the existing residential lots there that are 2-story homes. The 3 stories facing the school site are 3 stories and a bit larger. Again, the units originally proposed were quite a bit smaller because there were 8 in the duplex form. These are more larger footprint homes, but there's only 6 and more in keeping with traditional single family construction. The proposal does conform to our official community plan, the major corridor residential infill policies that do support this form of infill on major corridors and courtyard form, and the density is in keeping with those as well. Each unit will have a 2-car garage and a patio in our yard area. Visitor parking stalls are provided and some bicycle parking as well. Variances will be required to accommodate the courtyard form are typical for this form of housing. There'll be a front yard setback reduction from 6 to 4.5 meters, rear yard setbacks from 7.5 to 4.5 to 5.5, depending upon which structure you're looking at. There'll be interior yard setback slightly. And as well, there'll be some building heights on River Road are 8 meters to 8.7 meters. And those abutting schools will be a little bit higher to 8.7 meters as well. There will be some underground components for, I believe, basements and some elements of that. There'll also be the need to reduce the road standard, the servicing standard on River Road from 20 meters to 18 meters. Typically on multifamily, it's 20, but it's just the amount of space on River Road, as we all know, is quite limited. So these variances will be dealt with in the future if council proceeds to move the application forward to third reading. This could give you the site plan of the two homes facing the front, which will be more in single family in character, front doors facing the road, walkways. And then the 4 internal sites will be accessed by the internal lane to their garage doors, 2 garage parking stalls each, with the 2 visitor stalls showing just south of the front 2 units. These are the homes, general design of them. Again, they're typical 3-story, 2.5-story forms, some in-ground basement element you can see. Those are the homes facing River Road. And that shows the overall landscaping plan that has been approved. There'll be street trees provided in front yard setting to be in common with new development. And so we're recommending as staff that it does proceed to another public hearing to give the opportunity of the public to see and hear the proposal again and voice their comments to council. We're recommending, if it does go to final reading, that the following terms and conditions be met, which are typical: servicing agreements, Ministry of Transportation and Highway will have to approve the bylaw. There'll be some road dedication and some various covenants, geotechnical, visitor parking, and tree protection potentially. There's a stormwater management plan, of course, required. And in fact, all the existing buildings have been removed now already. The site is not contaminated. That has been confirmed. And if it proceeds, we will need an amenity contribution charge of $34,200. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I get a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Youssef, seconded by Mayor Remy. Thank you. Okay. Are there any questions from council? Councillor Dewick, followed by Councillor Youssef.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the presentation. So my first question, or actually on page 4, and this was clarified last time, so I think it's an error. It talks about street parking areas or access from the lane behind the adjacent property.
Correct. That is not correct.
So we need to fix that, please.
Yes, we will. I noticed that too. In
Because
fact,
there is no lane.
there is no
behind
lane
to
but
access.
There's
this
only an
property.
internal lane.
Okay,
Correct.
thank you. So that will be dealt with before the council
You
meeting.
bet.
And then should this receive support at next week's council meeting, when would the public hearing be held?
We are scheduling it for July.
July, that's what I
Correct.
thought. Okay. And then my question about it says in the conclusion that it was referred back and that the concerns were from public hearing were adjusted to address the concerns. So perhaps we could get some elaboration on that, because the previous council suggested 2, maybe 3 units. So how does 6 address those previous concerns?
You're absolutely right. Council of the day thought 8 was too many, and they did recommend 2. To be honest, 2 for a half-acre site is very, very low density, given it's an infill need on a corridor. It does, though, that direction did not conform to our official community plan guidelines for development of this nature. So the applicant was informed of the desire that council thought of 2, but they felt it was inappropriate. And so they've addressed much of the form of there was complaints about the form of the development. They're now single family in form. There's less units than was previously sought. And more sensitivity, I guess you could argue, has been applied to the new design than the previous one in regards to neighboring impacts. So you're absolutely right. It does not show 2 units. It's more appropriate at 6. Again, from a staff's point of view, we feel that 6 and 8 is appropriate in accordance with the OCP. Council didn't consider that. And so it was dealt with differently, but the applicant is still seeking more density than council wished at the time.
Okay, Now,
Thank
do
you.
we happen to know how much of this half acre is taken up by the road access to all the units?
Because it is a courtyard design, there is a significant amount of paving, let's say, because you have to access the deep end of the site. If it was an apartment, the entire lot coverage would be significantly more. The pavers are used instead of asphalt to try and still achieve the stormwater management objectives as we've required to do. The courtyard form is an attempt to create more sensitive infill with existing neighborhoods than it would be with an apartment or an attached form of housing. So it's not used in every site. It's more of a selective form of housing to insert into existing neighborhoods, but this large lot was probably better suited for this form than if it was an apartment or townhouse fit. So that's kind of where we came about it. Thank you.
Okay. And then do we have a requirement when it comes to development information meetings that the applicant should advise people that they should sign in, they must sign in order to have their voices heard? Or do we leave it up to the applicant?
Let's be clear, years ago, staff used to attend some of these meetings, but it became basically beat up on the planner night as opposed to the developer having to justify and defend his project, which is his. It's not the planning department's project. So staff rely on them to do the reporting. We have a policy that outlines all the procedures, notifications, and that they must follow. This applicant has followed that. And in the report, you see the results of the findings there. We have been satisfied with that process, reflecting the true nature of the discussions. And if not, a public hearing would certainly bring up those discrepancies to council and staff's attention. So they do a fairly good job, I would argue.
Okay, I'll save my comments for the council meeting because I'm not sure that the report is reflective of what I've heard. So my last question is around River Road has a number of panhandle lots. So is this something that council should be having the discussion about? Because if every lot along River Road was to proceed in this type of courtyard housing with the traffic, with the parking issues, is that something that realistically moving forward we can expect to continue on? Or should council, and this is my question, I know it's part of this because the property next door is a panhandle. So is it something that we should look at when it comes to courtyard housing in an area like this?
Right. It's certainly something that you could direct staff to look at. This particular lot isn't a panhandle though, but there are a lot of particularly on the south side. We also have the escarpment discussion to think about when we talk about density in that. We also have provincial changes that are coming soon in the fall, we believe, that'll potentially be game changers on what we can approve on single family lots, number of units and that. So there's a lot of things in motion right now. Just the matter at hand is that under the existing OCP and the policies that we have applied for many years, this proposal does conform with our existing policies for infill as well as major corridor. And that's why staff would support and moved it forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Councillor Dweck. Councillor Youssef.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to staff for the presentation. Just to build on that last point, with the upcoming changes that we see to legislation and to possible zoning, would staff consider it to be a bit more prudent to hold off on approving this application with all the variables that we have coming down the pipeline rather than try to get it through at the last minute when actually council will be going on break as well over the summer? So that's also something to consider.
That's really, I would say, a council decision. I would say, though, that the province is moving in the direction from what we've heard, and it's not yet set in stone. But basically, they're looking at the potential of having 4 units on every single family lot as a possibility, as well as 6 or more on a major road. So this would probably qualify for what they're proposing in the fall under the provincial changes. And it does conform with our OCP policies now. So that's why we've moved it forward. But council is certainly free to decide the fate of the project as well as the timing of when that decision would be made. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. And through you, Madam Chair, to staff, when we're talking about the characteristics of the neighborhood and the single family form of the neighborhood, with the variances that are proposed, most specifically height, rear yard setback, and a relaxing of the road standards, have we seen other properties along that neighborhood or in the area who have similar variances?
We have had a number of applications I can think of on 216th and River Road. And to the east, there's been another application that this council is probably not aware of that was given third reading for four units as well. Those variances are very common. The courtyard is a little bit different though, because it does tend to push the development out to the periphery of the site because the lane is needed to access into the site. And that does present a bit of a challenge. But again, these are not attached forms. They're single family homes, smaller homes. And the surrounding neighborhood could build 3-story homes, 11 meters in height with significantly more bulk and density to them than you could in the guidelines that control the form and character of this type of housing. So it's probably more controlled than outside. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And through you, Madam Chair, since the initial application that was received to rezone, and I believe it was 2020, judging from the application number, how many times has this property changed hands?
The applicant is here, Mr. Kevin Keys. Maybe I'll let him respond to that. Once. I guess there's been one change. Thank you.
Thank you for that answer. Certainly different from what I've known. Lastly, and I asked that last question to build on it. Now, moving forward, has staff considered reaching out to the school board staff for the possible acquisition of a portion or all of the property, as it would be better suited as part of the school than trying to shoehorn this much density into it?
The development information would have given the school board a notice, as well as if we do proceed to another public hearing, we will notify the school board of it. But we have not specifically reached out to see if they would like to purchase this property. Thank you.
Thank you. That was my question.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Those are my questions of clarification. Thank you, Mr. Goddard.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councillor Youssef. Councillor Carreras.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions. I wasn't around for the last time, although I did watch the video. Under the OCP, the urban residential major corridor, can you just talk about what qualifies for a major corridor? I know we touched briefly on this when we were talking about the fourplex a couple of weeks ago, but 4 is very different than 6. And I'm just
sure.
like, is this in the same category as Lougheed and Dewdney? Like, what? If the explanation would be great. Thank you.
The official community plan has at the back a map, a figure actually, that decides which are the major corridors in the city. And this is designated one. More than that, I'm not an expert at it, but I mean, this is a major east-west corridor through the city. Certainly not like Dewdney Trunk and all that, but it does function that way. It's a bit different in character, I would argue as well. That's why we would not support apartments in this area, but a single family form like this is more than appropriate in my opinion. Thank you.
Can you just, because it does talk about courtyards, and I think this is really sort of our first sort of courtyard. Can you just talk to me a little bit about the courtyard and how it differs from like a fourplex?
Sure.
Obviously the number, but
Sure.
outside of that, what are some of the differences?
Courthouses could actually be in a detached and or an attached form. It's really more a function of how the units face themselves and the spaces created around them, focusing on this central courtyard. It's a challenge that the courtyard also has to function as a drive aisle to access units. And that's what makes it more different than townhouses. Townhouses are all attached. They're typically linear. This, you have more flexibility in moving the units around, but it does tend to push the units to the periphery of the site. And you don't have those traditional rear yards that you would see in a townhouse. They're usually in smaller lots as well, but they're an attempt to try and internalize the density, to create a little bit more of a community feel. And yes, the courtyard also serves as a drive aisle, but it's done in a different material. It's landscaped differently. The units and the rooms face it differently and each other. So they're trying to be more communal oriented in its form. And it's typically lower density and on smaller sites than townhomes.
Okay.
If that helps.
It does. Thank you. It looks like from some of the drawings that these are going to have rooftop gardens. Is that?
I believe the ones on the east side may have a rooftop component. Is that right, Mr. Key?
balconies on the rooftop of 2 units facing overlooking the parking lot of the school district, but no, these are conventional single-family dwellings. They're glorified cottages. There's no room for gardens on roof. All the gardens, the shared community garden that we have, as well as individual gardens from the homes will be at grade on roof.
Okay, so sorry, I don't follow the difference between a patio and a rooftop garden. So there won't be a garden on there, but there is a patio on the roof of the ones on the east.
So that's right.
Yeah, okay. So how much taller is that than what we normally, like, I have to go back to the variance. Would this make it tall? This obviously makes it much taller than everything else around there. Is that?
Well, it gives people the opportunity to use a rooftop space that they wouldn't otherwise have on their roof. That's right. So they could be standing up taller, but I don't think the structure is particularly much still more taller than 3 stories.
The other question I have, and it wasn't in the report, but it was in the public consultation piece. It speaks to 8 or 9 parking spaces on the street. And I'm curious how we do that. Just knowing that area, it's not a super wide lot and it's also a very, very chaotic space on River Road.
I would say there's probably only 3 or 4 that would be allowed, given the space of the frontage on the River Road, plus the access aisle to the site. So
Okay, so we're looking at 3 or 4, not
I
8
would
or
think
9
so,
that are
correct.
that were in the development meeting.
if that was the case, yes,
feedback.
maybe Mr. Key, you could clarify that for me.
Certainly, yeah. We have courtyard access driveways in the middle as well. Okay, thank you.
Kevin Key, I'm the development manager of the project. The courtyard access obviously is in the middle. We have 3 or 4 parking spaces on either side of that. We are actually improving the road towards the school district parking lot. So there'll be a little space there. We're also required to add probably only 1, maybe 2, but probably 1 because there's a fire hydrant to the west. And that is the property that's next door. That was a home that was built when this rezoning before I came on in 2021, 10,000 square foot home with 8 bathrooms. They did not do home improvements on the road. And we are going to be doing that now because the city took a bit of cash from them to do that. So when you talk about parking spaces on the street, we're talking about ours on our site as well as to the west a little bit as well too. So we think that of the conventional widths, if you look at 6-meter parallel parking spaces, that we may well be able to get, I can't remember if it's 7 or 8 or something like that, possibly 9, depending on how they're used. School drop off at the public hearing or the development information hearing, somebody suggested like an Amazon or delivery drop off or something like that. That's up to the city. We'll build them. What you do with them and how you regulate them is your decision.
Okay, so there's the road, then they're parallel parked, and then there's the sidewalk, and then there's that driveway in and out in the middle. Well, there'd be 3 driveways in and out. Actually, if you're speaking about the property next door, there's driveways in between them all.
That's right. There's a panhandle there as well.
Mhm.
Correct. Not knowing that they were upgrading the lands to the west, there's probably 6 or 8. I don't know. I'd have to confirm the distances and that I don't know. off my
And they just
drawings here.
become, so it also talks about Strata being able to regulate those parking spots, but I assume they wouldn't be able to regulate parking spots on a street
Correct.
or in front.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. So when it says about being able to regulate it, can't. I just have one more question, and it's just a general question. It's not to the developer. Thank you for attending. No, it's great to have you here to answer these questions. In the report, it references a 2014 housing action plan. What was the plan, the housing plan that was passed in 2019?
That was, I believe, the housing action plan. Then we went into the, I think it was the assessment of our housing needs in the community.
So the 2019 was a reassessment of the housing needs. And
Correct.
so we need to embark, and I think that's in the plan somewhere to,
The province requires us, yes, to do that every 5 years.
so the housing action plan will be redone.
No, the
Housing needs is what is
correct
is
needs assessment.
mandated.
Correct. Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
Okay. I'm just looking at a 2014 date and I guess
Yep.
that's the work that we need to do. Anything older than like 5 years makes me a bit nervous,
Housing is
right?
gonna,
So-
housing is gonna be the big push over the next few years, I could
Yeah.
think,
All right, thank you.
with the province.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Curris. Mayor Remy.
Thank you very much. I'm trying to understand this because obviously we weren't here. So it came to council before of an eightplex or an
Correct.
eight unit.
Mhm.
And the council of the day sent it back.
After
Was there
public
a
hearing.
recommendation for 2 to 3 lots?
At my recollection of the time was that council directed to have 2 units only.
2 units only.
Mhm.
So, and then now it's come back as 6.
Correct.
So I'm trying to understand why it didn't come back with more towards what the recommendation was from council of the day.
Right. And again, we discussed that with the applicant numerous times and the previous owner, and they felt that that was completely unpractical economically and for whatever, and didn't meet our objectives at the time for the policy and our OCP. Now, that's why you are here looking at that option. If you agree that it should be 2 units, then you can make that decision. Again, housing is a critical need right now in the community, and greater density is where we're heading. But that's just council's role and decision to make that decision. 6 was probably the cut off point that made it economical to proceed, I would say. And that's for the discussions we had. But we're under obligation to bring this application back to council in the form that they're willing to propose. We could have recommended not approving it and denying it, but we felt it still meets enough of the policies that council should reconsider it. We also have a new council, so, and different needs that have occurred since then.
And then my final follow-up question. So there was one public hearing
Correct.
that was based on the 8.
Correct.
So, okay, so there's been nothing else with the public.
They've gone back to the community in a development information meeting with the revised 6-unit proposal. And that's reflected in the report, but that's why we're recommending, if council is interested in this proposal, a new public hearing must be held to reflect the new design. And then council can hear input from the community again, and then determine what they want to do, granting 3rd reading or referring it back to staff for whatever density you think is appropriate, or denying the application or approving it. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all questions I have.
Councillor Town.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Couple questions here. First of all, I'm curious about the height. I'm looking at the ADP comments, and there was questions about whether what the height of these units would be, and then what our variances would be. And that could sort of maybe staff or the developers speak to why this particular height for these units were chosen.
Maybe I'll let Mr. Key respond to that question.
If I could just add something to the mayor's query as well too. I believe if we look at the motion from the previous council, it simply directed that the application go back to staff. There was nothing in the motion, and this is news to me, that there was a suggestion of go back and specifically build 2 or 3 units or something like that. We don't see those in a lot of motions. That's a specific direction. And so anyways, there may have been a mention from 1 or 2 people or something like that maybe, how about this, or, but it was not a part of the motion. And so there was no direct direction for that. Getting back to could you clarify that again with height? I didn't quite hear exactly what the question was on height.
Yes, through the chair. A question about the height of units. Could you sort of elaborate on why this specific height was chosen for these units? Why not shorter? Why not taller? Why that?
Certainly. There's a long and a short answer because it involves, a big design process that we went
So
through.
the context is, of course, that the neighborhood is concerned about.
Yeah, that's
So
right.
if you
Yeah.
can speak to sort of why that height was chosen, even and I'm sure you've heard the comments from the neighborhood. So from your perspective, why did you choose this particular height?
Right. The units on the we call the C units. That's the pair on the southwest. Those units are adjacent to a driveway, a panhandle driveway and a parking area. There's not really a house nearby, but we elected that those would be 2-story and they're wider in footprint, but they're lower and they're stepped back from those neighboring SFD, single family dwelling areas and those lots. So that's the reason for that. The ones on the front were quite clear. We wanted something to recognize the character of the neighborhood, and knowing that we didn't want to get too modern with townhouses or modern even with single family homes. This is one of the reasons that we used a really good home designer who specializes that rather than an architect who does high-rise, low-rise townhouses. This is someone who, and it's a huge cost saving using a building designer who specializes in single family dwellings. The ones to the east, these are the pair we call Unit B. They are the two that directly overlook the school parking lot and sort of the wall of the gymnasium. There's no windows or classrooms there. Those 2 units, we decided that those would be for variety and for difference in the market, is to make them more compact in terms of their footprint, but raise them up a little bit. And so they're built that way. Now, they're also 3 floors, but at the same time, what we did is we had their open space balcony also on the roof. There's one on the main floor by the living room, but there's also one on the roof. And where the height comes in is that there has to be a small little, if you can imagine, like a shed to get up the stairs that's weather protected to get onto that rooftop patio, which is about, I think, 430 square feet or something like that. It's fairly modest, and it looks east. So it doesn't even overlook the other 4 homes in the project, let alone the other ones to the west as well too. So that was the rationale for that. I heard a comment about something about courtyard. I haven't been following very carefully, but I had thought that this council, since being elected, has worked on and approved several RT2 projects, and recently one just east on River Road. So RT2 is the courtyard. So I think you guys do have dealt with them, but I could be wrong.
Thank you. My second question is, I won't spend too long on this, but I just would like a clarification on the parking, because seems like a long answer to previous parking questions. I'm seeing 22, 23 in this package that we have in front of us, 2 covered parking spots per unit. And then a certain amount on the street, and then plus 2 visitor parking. I just wanted a confirmation just from city staff who have looked at this project. Is 8 to 9 a reasonable expectation for street parking, or are we looking at fewer from what we can tell?
I don't have that answer for you. We can provide that for council. But there's certainly 2 per unit. That's 12 plus 2 more visitors. There's 14 on site. There's probably 3 to 6 in front on River Road, and then there may be a few more to the lands to the west. So again, but those are not conditions of the parking bylaw. Really what we need to focus on is the density and the parking required for the density, and 14 stalls on site meets the bylaw for this form. And in fact, I believe courtyards do not require visitors parking stalls because they're supposed to be a kind of a single family low density form. Those visitor parking stalls are just additional because I think we heard previously that visitor parking could be a concern. But river or street parking could be used by anybody, not even these people. It could be used by teachers or anybody who wanted to use it.
I see. So just to make sure I understand that technically this form of housing does not require visitor parking.
That's correct.
And the parking bylaw is 2 per unit, which does conform
For the
to
dwelling, correct.
for 2 per dwelling. And
Per
then
dwelling.
the 2 additional visitor parking spaces, which it sounds like city staff are fairly certain can be provided, given the lot will be provided, and those are not required. And the street parking that we're discussing is not required at all under a
Correct.
parking bylaw. Okay, that's good.
The parking bylaw does require for apartments and townhouses 0.2 per unit, like in an apartment. So really they would require 1.2 visitor stalls if it was an apartment, and we rounded up to make it 2, but they did it in spite of the bylaw not requiring it.
Thank you. Okay, and then my next question is around the traffic component. I think my understanding of what I've heard from the neighborhood is that it seems to be largely a traffic and parking issue and not so much a housing issue, but I just want to make sure I understand in terms of, and to my understanding, after the Golden Years Bridge was developed, this collective road became an arterial road or became more of an arterial road. Maybe just a general question that's not so much about the specific unit, but just about our traffic plan in general. Do we have any thought about the traffic management around on this corridor used as an arterial?
Thank you. And through the chair, maybe I'll jump in on that. And so the River Road has always been an arterial road network through the various STPs that we've done. And the STP that we're currently working on, it will continue to be an arterial road network as one of our major arteries, east-west, aside from Dewdney, Lougheed, and Abernathy, would be the other three. The combined volume right now on River Road is about 7,500 vehicles per day. When we look at the 6 units, we're looking at approximately 3 trips in the morning peak and about up to 5 trips in the PM peak. And so quite minimal and compared to the existing volume on the road. And then just to give some criteria and some confidence to council. So typically we have a traffic impact assessment policy within the city of Maple Ridge. And as applications move forward, we consider how many trips that they're expected to generate. And so we set that criteria. If you're going to generate more than 100 trips outside of the town center, that you would require a traffic impact assessment to determine if there's any infrastructure upgrades required as part of your development. Given that we're in the 3 to 5 trip range, it's far below that criteria. And so really now this is a matter that lies with council to determine if you can support that or not.
I see. That's helpful. Thank you. And then my final question is around
Councillor Tan, I'm very sorry. We will come back. Okay.
Thank you,
I know
Madam Chair.
we all have a lot of questions, and so we'll continue on, but just if we could aim for a rough 5-minute per councillor at a turn, just to allow everybody the chance to participate. So Councillor Tan, I'm going to mark you down for round 2. And we will start on round 2 with Councillor Durick, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So my question is regarding the decision of the previous council to whether or not to turn this down or to refer it back to staff. And I'm looking to Mr. Goddard. When we referred it back to staff, the question was asked, does that mean that all our comments will be reflected in that decision? And the answer was yes. Is that correct, sir?
That's correct.
So council did give direction, albeit it's not typical. It would be part of the formal motion because that would be crafting a motion on the fly.
My recommendation, or my memory, if it serves me correctly, was that it was directed that 2 units would be only considered here. I can double check that. We'll provide that information to you from the minutes of that meeting. But again, that was my memory off the top of my head.
And thank you for clarifying that, because in fact, everyone was opposed to the application and that was the direction that was given.
Mm-hmm.
And staff were directed and given the application, the opportunity to continue on if that was to be adhered to, or our options at the time was to turn it down, which was where we were headed.
Yep.
Thank you.
Now, Mr. Key wasn't involved in those earlier meetings. I think he came on later, so maybe that's where the confusion lies.
And I guess that's the next question. Did Mr. Key, did you watch the public hearing? Because if you had watched the public hearing, you would know this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Durick. Councillor Tan.
I'll pass on my last question. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Looking around for any further questions. A lot has been covered. I guess I would just ask a little bit about if this does go ahead to a public hearing, can you just confirm for me what the process is to let the public know?
Sure. The normal process of any public hearing is notification in the paper 10 days before the meeting occurs. That's notifications done twice, as well as a mail out is sent by our clerk's department to the properties. I believe it's 100-meter distance surrounding it. Is that correct, Patrick? Or is it 50? 50, I'm sorry, 50 meters.
Thank you. What about the signs that I sometimes see put up? Is that the responsibility of the city or the
There is the
developer?
development sign posted on the property, and when the determination of when the date is, the applicant will be requested to place a sticker on that sign that shows when the date, and the location, of course, is City Hall. So that's our normal process.
Okay, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Okay, so I'm going to call the vote, and just to be clear, the question before us is, do we want to move this forward to the next council meeting for debate? Okay, so all those in favor? Okay, and so that is unanimous, and we will move that forward to next council meeting. Thank you. Thank you to staff and to Mr. Key for being here today.
Thank you.
Okay. What do we have next?
Right. The next application, Madam Chair, is application 2018-349 DVP. And this pertains to 21745 River Road, and it is a development variance permit. And Mr. Goddard is going to be doing this one too.
Thank you.
Thank you. Please go ahead, Mr. Goddard.
Sure. This is a relatively minor matter, council. We're creating two lots here from one. The width of the lot does not meet the minimum bylaw requirement for the zone. Thus, it has to be varied. It's talking inches here. I think it's 3 or 4 inches, but in any case, it doesn't need to be varied for me to approve the subdivision as the approving officer. So it is a development variance permit at that location. Single family urban residential, like the previous designation on that last site. It's going from RS1 to RS1B. This is 668 meters squared lots down to 557 square lots. Of course, the lot is quite large at almost 0.4 of an acre, in fact. The variance again is to reduce the lot width for the 2 new lots being created. There's the subject site. There it exists today. There's a home on the property that will be removed. Again, the lots are just 2 being created here to RS1B, which is in keeping with the neighborhood. RS1, RS1B is common in the area. The existing structure will be removed and access will remain off of River Road for the 2 new lots. Again, there's the slight width variance required, 0.1 of a meter. And we're recommending in staff that it be supported. There's the proposed subdivision layout. Existing house will be removed. And the variance is just slight from 14.9, it looks like. So it's very slight. But it has to be approved. So there we are.
Thank you, Mr. Goddard. Can I get a mover and a seconder, please? Moved by Councillor Dewick, seconded by Councillor Youssef. Are there any questions from council? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor of moving this forward to next week's council meeting? And Councillor Dewick, sorry, I'm just not seeing your card. Yeah, sorry. Thank you. That is unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you. What do we have next, Mr. Hlavik-Windsor?
Okay, the next item 6.1 is an award of contract, and this is for the 2023 pavement rehabilitation program. I don't believe we have a presentation for this one.
No presentation? Okay, can I get a mover and a seconder, please? Moved by Councillor Youssef, seconded by Councillor Carreras. Are there any questions from council? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of moving this to next week's council meeting? And that is unanimous. Thank you, council. Mr. Hlavik-Windsor, what do we have next on the agenda?
Okay, the next item is item 10, Madam Chair, which is community forum. So if participants in the community are reminded here that there should be no discussion of public hearing bylaws which have not yet reached conclusion. Each speaker will have 2 minutes to speak to council, and a second opportunity may be provided once all speakers in the queue have had an opportunity to speak. So for members of the public who would like to speak during community forum, please register as a speaker by clicking the microphone icon in One Meeting and turn on your camera. And if you're attending in person, please come forward to the podium when Madam Chair invites you.
Thank you. Does any member of the public wish to address council today? Do we see anyone online?
We have one person online.
Okay. Bear with us while we pull you up, person online.
We have asked for this individual to unmute, and they have not yet.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so if you are online and you would like to address council, please unmute your microphone and go ahead with your comments. Okay, last call. Would anyone like to address council today? No? Okay. So we will move ahead to the next item on the agenda.
The next item on the agenda, Madam Chair, is adjournment.
Wonderful. Can I have a motion to adjourn, please? Moved by Councillor Youssef, seconded by Mayor Rumi. All those in favor? And we are adjourned. Thank you all for being here today.